Hello and welcome to this edition of the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. On this episode, we are discussing a matter that touches the entire world, that is in relation to the swearing in and indeed the events that have happened after the swearing in of the President of the United States of America, His Excellency Donald J. Trump, 47th president of that particular country, and we know a lot comes with the Trump presidency. But before we get into that conversation, there's a lot of things that are making headlines across the world, and to begin with our particular country, the Independent Electoral Commission of the Republic of Uganda is undertaking the National Voters Register Update exercise, and you all out there, I don't know whether the people in my panel here have already updated their details, but I encourage you to go out and update your details so that you can participate in the forthcoming general election. Other activities happening across. Just 2 days ago, we are celebrating the National Liberation Day, 26th of January. We know the NRM government and indeed the NRA team was in Mubende celebrating, and many other people were celebrating in different parts of the country, but also others saying it is not a day worth celebration, there's nothing to celebrate, and so many things that come around that particular issue. Out of the country, there is a ceasefire underway in Gaza. As of today, we know 290 Palestinians have been released, 7 Israelis have been released, and we hope that process continues to yield and continually we get everlasting peace in that particular part of the world. The war in Sudan is continuing, the war in Ukraine is continuing, and we know that efforts to bring it down and many other events happening across the world, and we hope everything continues to happen leading into peace. We know just in the neighborhood here, M23 is now in charge of Goma and indeed the broader Eastern DRC Congo, and these are things we keep looking at closely, and we hope that can be a peaceful way to resolve such matters, because peace is very important for the region but also the world, especially if we are to grow as a people, if we are to live and if we are to be in a world that is sustainable. Away from that conversation, I want to bring you my panel here. I have a panel of 2 distinguished gentlemen. They are citizens of this country, and I'll give them opportunity to speak to you before we get into the depth of the conversation. I'll start with the colleague at the extreme end.
Thank you, Philip, and Happy New Year to you and those watching us.
Thank you.
And those on camera. My name is Augustine Olowo. I prefer for these shows to just be a youth leader.
Thank you, Olowo Augustine, youth leader. We're happy to have you, and we can't wait to hear what you have to share about the topic we have at hand today. Ndugu.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you to the viewers who have taken their time to come and listen to us. My name is Bbosa. I am a student at Makerere University in my final year of study at Makerere Law School. I'm so glad to be in this place. It's my first time, and
we are glad to have you, Bbosa. It's good to have you. We have a lawyer on ground, and certainly he's going to share with us what it means to the lawyers and to the law to have a president like Donald Trump and the things he keeps doing. He's a president that you'll never run short of news if you have Trump as president, so we have a lot to pick from him. So, gentlemen, look, on the 20th of this month, Donald Trump was sworn in as President of the United States of America. And that was a very busy day, because in the country that's when the Electoral Commission actually started this exercise of voter register update. It was the National Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States of America, and Donald Trump was swearing in as president. Such a cocktail of events. But before we get into even what he has done, I want to pick your thoughts and reactions to how Donald Trump came back to the presidency, his win against Kamala Harris, and your thoughts. Was it something you saw coming, or you were surprised by this win? I should start.
Well, I think that as an ardent follower of President Donald Trump, for me from the beginning, I thought Trump would win. Wait, look, he has already proved that he wins against ladies, you know. So, and when
you need to qualify that.
When the president said he wasn't running and Kamala came in, I knew it would be a win. But also that incident of shooting in a campaign rally, I thought that there would have been a few sympathy votes here and there, and that would make him president of the US. And also his policies, that his radicalism in policy. I think the American people needed a president like Donald Trump.
Sure. Thank you so much. Price.
Yes.
What did you think about Donald Trump running for presidency, and what were your reactions to his win?
Well, I think by the time he was taken out of office, remember he's the 45th and 47th, there was a lot of ongoing perception. Leadership is about opportunity, and when you get into leadership, they get to see you, get to criticize you, and get to appreciate your service. Now, Donald Trump was criticized by the Democrats, obviously, like the politics of the US is. However, they gave an opportunity to the Democrats, and clearly you could see a lot of chaos, which made a foundation for Donald Trump to make a comeback later on. Looking at the chaos at the southern border, the campaigns, the retaliation of his supporters at the Capitol building, which led to arrest of very many of his supporters. You realize that even the wars, his foreign policy, or the foreign policy of President Biden outside there in Ukraine and whatever, you realize that more than ever, there was a lot of escalation of wars or foreign military intervention in various states outside USA. And to him, I think he sold it to the Americans that we are the reason that outside there is very unstable, and that a lot of resources being invested outside there could actually be invested in this country, perhaps employ more of the US citizens, and for us to be able to benefit as a nation, as opposed to actually unstabilizing the countries elsewhere. So I think when the US citizens bought into that, he picked into their interest, they appreciated it. It was a clear win, looking at what already Augustine has already talked about, the campaign events and politics. Clearly, the Democrats never had a chance. They were not prepared. They would never win that election.
Wow, they were not prepared and they would never win that election. Such a powerful statement about that particular Donald Trump victory, and when it was almost a landslide victory. He has a trifecta in that: winning the Senate, winning the House of Representatives, and winning the presidency, including winning all the 7 what they call, they have those states, the swing states. He won all the 7 of them, and it was quite massive for him to have that kind of election. But here today, surely shall not talk about the internal United States politics. We want to talk about what that politics and indeed the Trump presidency means for Uganda and by extension the African continent. And look, on day 1 in office, Donald Trump put his signature on a couple of documents. You could call them their proclamations, there are many things in there. And when you look at a presidency signing 46 documents on day 1, what does it even mean? To have a president wanting to be so busy on day 1, does it signify a very busy president, a president that is going to be actively serving the people, a president that is simply looking for cameras?
I think that those documents were to undo what President Biden did. And running for office of the president, where Biden previously occupied. You see, when Biden came in as president, he actually outdid a lot of things that Trump had done. He actually recalled a lot of aid, a lot of, and put priorities elsewhere. So President Trump getting into office and saying, wait, we need to build an America for Americans, it was important that he does sign all those documents and try to freeze a few of the monies that are coming to Africa and other continents and countries, especially those that, in my opinion, are in support of gayism and homosexuality. So I think that For him, he scored. It was also, I think, the very first time those cameras were getting too close to the table and where the US president signs those documents. I think that there could be a little bit of course, politics and camera in it, but I think the main point was for him to expose President Biden and show and try to breathe new air to America and try to really make a point that, you know what, this is how the presidency of Donald Trump, the second term of Donald Trump, will look like. And I think he did well there.
And I want to start from what you talk about freezing. So one of the executive orders he signs is halting the sending of any monies to not just Africa, but across the world.
Yeah.
And he says for the next 3 months, the United States government is going to make a review and find out where should we actually continue putting our money and where should we not, and all round. Talk to me about that. When the United States government freezes money, for example, coming to Uganda, what does it mean for Uganda?
Oh yes, there are 3 areas where the presidency of Donald Trump or the US actually intervenes in African issues. The first is in governance, and the second is in economics, economic policy, and so on and so forth. And then the other very good sector is health, which is actually the major one, health and education. So freezing for the next 90 days, when some of those services won't be in Uganda, we are potentially looking at about 2,000 medical officers being unemployed. We are looking at about 1.5 billion not coming into the country. We are looking at the US mission that has actually trained our teachers here, that has distributed study material to our schools, all that frozen. And so yes, we are going to struggle a little bit, especially, and this is not just happening in Uganda, it is happening in most of the other African countries as well. Talk about funding to HIV patients and medicine for malaria, IDRC, all these very serious, crucial medical services, those of TB. So I think that it speaks volumes to what our healthcare system is and how we are going to cope with this is about government of Uganda and where they set their priorities and all the other African countries, and by the way, including South Africa.
Well, thank you. Bbosa, look, a president who just comes in and says we're not going to be giving our money like it has been. This must be a monster president, not so?
I wouldn't say so, because this goes back to maybe the neighbor principle. For example, where if you're seated as neighbors, let us say in Uganda they call them a mizigo, those bus houses, and you rely on that particular person to give you salt or a few equities in your home. When they stop giving it to you, you're going to eventually lack. And you're going to have to struggle to probably find alternatives. Now this is the question for all African countries. This is something that African countries have been seated on a pendulum bomb. And they have always known that these are actors who can at any time withdraw their services, withdraw their aid, withdraw their grants, donations, and whatever. Anytime, as long as you don't agree to their policies. And the question has been, are African countries ready for that? Now, Donald Trump has come to do that. Remember, he's not a monster. He's actually offering you his services. He's offering you his money. Does that make him a monster? No. He has been providing that service. Right? Now, the question is, have you always been prepared? Okay, if you have not been prepared for that, now you're in a very bad position. What then are your alternatives? I think it is an opportunity for you as a country, you as a person who is lacking at that time, to know that actually it can happen. Now I need to start looking inwards into my country to see or provide an alternative.
You see, Bbosa, by the time I come to you for help, that means I'm unable to provide for myself. And when you are willing to offer, and indeed you have the capacity to offer, you know that I'm helping someone that is unable to provide for themselves. Donald Trump is fully in the know of what this money does. He mentioned healthcare, HIV drugs, malaria, tuberculosis. We have a TB center under construction now, and the moment the money stops, that center stops immediately. What does Donald Trump think of the people that are not going to get medicine this month, people that are not going to go to school this month, doctors that are going to lose jobs? He mentioned about 2,000. What more can a monster be?
I think now it goes back to the question of who was he campaigning for in the first place. Donald Trump was campaigning for America. Augustine has already mentioned it. He wasn't campaigning for Africa. When he was looking for votes, I don't think he went to any African state. Now he has to fulfill his promises, which goes to the principle or the statement he already made that on his first day he had to write 46 declarations. He has an obligation, he has a duty to Americans first before he moves forth, right? So, up until he has executed his promises of protecting the southern border, which will require extracting some of the finances or resources or the aid that he has been investing elsewhere to focus it onto his Americans, protecting them. These are promises he made, and that is a mandate for every person who is standing to fulfill his mandate to the voters. Now we understand these people are lacking. But again, when you look at Uganda, we have been called the Pearl of Africa. Yeah, we have so many of resources that we can utilize. Yeah, we have so many. You cannot tell me that we cannot. When COVID was happening, when we were having the COVID period, I understand there was advice from the World Health Organization and whatever, but it was an effort again on the people of Uganda, for example, to make sure that they combat, to wash hands, whatever, and all that sort of what. They had to look inwards and make sure that you realize that President Museveni put in a lot of effort, communicate or press addresses after 2 weeks to make sure that some of these things are combated. Now, what we need as African countries to realize that at any one time, this is an eye-opener. At any one time, even China, for example, in Uganda, that we rely on to construct our roads, can one day say that we are out. And then you will see how that will be devastating. There will be a lot of commodities that will not be, that we are relying on. You realize
so in other words,
you are
saying that Uganda and indeed other African countries should do away with depending on other nations to make their service sector work.
That would be something that I agree on. However, what Donald Trump did was erratic. Yeah, it came out of the blue, whereas we were also anticipating it, but it wasn't enough time to prepare for it. Now, African countries are potentially automatically dependent. Now, we need a process of starting to blend into having ourselves rely on ourselves so that as and when that support is revoked, at least we have a starting point. Yeah? Because HIV is here, all those diseases are here, and yet we shall have to deal with them at the end of that day.
Thank you, Bbosa. Augustine, I was listening to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Diana Atwine, and she says since the executive order, they are engaging their partner, the United States government, so that it can continue giving them monies in areas that cannot stop. And where they do not agree, she said they are also engaging Ministry of Finance to try and source monies elsewhere to bridge the gap. Do you see Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health being able to cover these gaps that have been covered by the United States government and ensuring people continue getting services the way they've been?
Yeah, I think that, and I've said it several times on this show, that Uganda as a country and Africa, we have the resources to actually finance some of these things, if not our entire budget. And for the next 90 days, health has about 1.5 billion from US aid. So I think that, yes, Ministry of Finance can get that money. And by the way, intervention of the US in the health sector is about 10 trillion. This is also the same money that gets lost in corruption. So if we only closed the gap on corruption, we would be able to finance the health sector fully without actually having...
We're looking at feasibility. Is it possible to close that gap just because the US is out?
No, it's not an easy thing to do away with a mindset that has been created in our people. But I'm trying to show that, you see, look, maybe a few months from now, you see, 2 years ago, there was something given to the parliamentary commissioners to actually just say thank you for the work that you've done, even those that are actually working. So if we are able to give out such monies, I think the Ministry of Finance should be able to get 1.5 billion to continue actually running the health sector as it has been running. But you realize we've already lost a few days of the 90. And again, being futuristic, what happens if after those 90 days, indeed the US government declines to, to renew these contracts here and there, or to even provide the foreign aid? Because you see, from experience, we have seen that from the first presidency of Donald Trump, you saw him reduce funding on foreign aid and foreign investment. You saw him reduce. So what happens if he reduces our own here, or for Africa, by maybe 50% or around there? What will African nations depend on? So I think, yes, this country has got the resources, we've got the money. The other day you saw URA report that they have actually collected past the target by, I think, 53 billion or thereabout. So we have the money, we just need to pick on the right priorities.
Thank you so much. One of the other things that come out in this Donald Trump era is his policies being against the LGBTQ community. And we know what that means for Uganda, because since the enactment of the anti-homosexuality bill, we've had very many things happening in the country. One of them being, again, reduction in aid that was coming into the country. Talk about sanctioning of particular people. We know we were struck off the AGOA list, United States of America, again linked to that particular issue. And now that we have a president that thinks we're actually right, if you look at his policy, I saw one of the statements he made was that effective 20th, the official policy of the United States government is that there are only two genders, male and female. And that's what Uganda was saying. Do we see that being something that can link Uganda to the United States? And in any case, can we think that that should be something that again inspires the US to, once the 3 months are done, renew this kind of partnership in terms of grants and donations to the country? Yes, President.
The LGBT community, I think, to one extent, you realize at least Uganda had made a position on that effect. And also, to the other extent, US, like you had already mentioned, had withdrawn certain aids and grants and connections with them because of that effect. Me, what I would potentially say about that is that I hope that Donald Trump would think about that. However, when Donald Trump was making such declarations, for example, the declaration on the LGBT community, it was not because Uganda had made that position or any other country had made a position that there will be only male and female. It was potentially because of the status quo, because there was a problem. As we realized, for example, in athletics, we were seeing people, I would wake up today and say, I identify as female, and then I go apply in Olympics for women, and then how to compete.
Yeah, you know that there are very many concerns, soldiers male identifying as female, basketball players, male identifying as female, and they play for female teams, and things were getting messed up. But look, the point I'm trying to make here is my English teacher used to tell me that birds of the same feather flock together. Do we see this American bird and the Ugandan bird and many of these other birds that think the same flock together in this kind of arrangement?
Now, we would look at it in this alternative, because at the end of the day, USA and Donald Trump is not completely cutting ties with the rest of the world. It keeps its connections. Actually, I think that Donald Trump's policies actually a double-edged sword. He tries to keep American superiority up while at the same time withdrawing support. So he expects the rest of the world to get.
What Trump wants to do, we have what we call the MAGA project, Make America Great. And in making America great, that means the others have to be inferior. There is no other way around. If I am great, then you have to be below me. And that's what he wants. He says we want America to be great, be stronger than all these other countries combined.
And one of the ways in which he has done so is through the sanctions, the punitive sanctions that he has put on the countries that are trying to bring up the policy of the de-dollarization, where the countries of BRICS, and threatening that we shall put 100% sanctions. We think that by doing so, he's trying to keep connection or keep the American superiority up ahead. So now we think also that in the same manner, using that kind of relationship, that Donald Trump, whereas he has withdrawn certain policies, is going to sit down and is going to face very many challenges. Those declarations were radical, one. But also secondly, to execute them is going to be a different story altogether. He's going to have to mitigate and know that I need to extend a hand here, get allies, because you cannot exist in a bubble if you want to become a superior country.
2 months ago, Uganda was declared a new partner to the BRICS institution. And when you say that Donald Trump is threatening a lot of things, including sanctioning those countries 100%, should Uganda be worried?
It should be worried. Why? It should be very, very worried, because the dollar, at the end of the day, is a principle, is a very valuable currency in the trade around the country, all around the globe. Now, for us to expect anything from the USA, you must be able to trade. And very many trade relations that are happening in Uganda are happening on the basis of a dollar. Now, to withdraw that is going to be a process, and they will realize that. They will realize that Uganda is trying to sway away and join the BRICS and try to adopt their policies, right? It is a very dangerous position. What Uganda should do is rethink their position, knowing that the president we are dealing with is this kind of person. We need to rethink. Even when we graduate to another president, be it a Democrat, be it a whatever, that president will come back and reinforce, because they will not allow to lose touch. Because if you advocating for American superiority, then you don't lose the most important currency of ensuring that. And that is trade, that is finance, that is economics. And how to control states is through finance and economics.
Thank you so much. Augustine, I want to pick your thoughts on this particular issue, but also the anti-homosexuality issue. One, he tells us we need to think about how we relate with BRICS because we need the United States. But look, we are talking about BRICS that has China, has India, has Brazil, has Russia. These countries account for 40% of global GDP. They account for about 60% of global population. The United States has just about 325 million people. China alone has 1.5. India has 1.6. Where should we really be if we want to prosper as a country, but also largely as a continent?
Oh yes, I think that in my opinion, Uganda is, in terms of our law, our position on homosexuality and lesbianism and gayism, I think that we are performing very well, at least in the eyes of the US. And I don't expect that the US will cut ties with us based on our position on LGBTQ. But in terms of BRICS, I think whereas Uganda needs to take itself slow in joining BRICS, I also think that, you see, America also needs China. I think that is the reason why TikTok is not banned now in the US. But you see, X is still banned in China. So if this superpower that we are talking of, the US, also wants China, I think there is no reason why Uganda should cut ties with China, why Uganda should cut ties with Russia, because at any time, should the US turn its back on Uganda, especially in defense, Russia is where we go. So I think that Uganda should just play its cards so well to avoid being seen as one dining with an opponent or something like in that relation. But the BRICS idea, for me, it's a beautiful idea because you're talking of a very powerful economies coming together. In class, if they, I remember I have a sister I wanted to take to repeat senior 2. When I went to school, the head teacher told me I will take this girl to senior 3 and I will put her in the brightest stream A. So somehow, this girl also got bright because she was put in a class of bright students.
There was better competition.
Exactly. So if Uganda wants to be a big economy, it has to rub shoulders with the bigger economies.
And of course, we have government policy that says they need to transform our economy in the next 15 years from the $50 billion to $500 billion. So certainly, I guess this is where we need to look at. Quite important, but again, this dollar thing, Price here talks to me about the importance of the dollar. You see, what makes the dollar is the people that use it.
Yes.
If the people choose to let go of the dollar, it's no longer dominant. Therefore, I would imagine the United States is actually very much interested in trying to persuade people to keep using the dollar other than keeping using this dollar to punish the very people who have an option of letting it go. What do you think?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I think the issue of the dollar is not a voluntary one. Economically, it's compulsory. Uganda cannot wake up one day and sustain a policy of we are not using dollars anymore.
I mean, we've seen countries undertaking bilateral agreements, including actually Uganda with India, where we're supposed to trade in our own currencies, the rupee and the Ugandan shillings. Kenya has done so, Russia has done the same, China. When you go to Malaysia, Indonesia, many of these countries have undertaken agreements at the bilateral level to reduce the use of the dollar. Why? Because the United States keeps using this dollar to punish them.
Yeah.
You do something they don't agree with, then they say, oh, we are sanctioning you based on the dollar.
And that is the very reason. It goes back to what Augustine has been playing. We are only pawns. The African continent is only a pawn in this whole economic circus, right? We need to be wise about how even when we have made those bilateral agreements, we have not withdrawn from the USA because it is important that we keep the dollar in the country. The day you wake up and say there is no dollar in the country, the effects will be quite devastating.
Wow. The day you wake up without the dollar, the effects are quite devastating. You on the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV, and we are discussing Donald Trump, his presidency, and what it means for countries like Uganda and by extension, the African continent. The Youth Roundtable takes a very short break, and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that very short break. It is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV, and today we are discussing the presidency of Donald Trump and its impact on the African continent and largely the entire world, because the things that keep being mentioned about Donald Trump have an effect widely to the entire world. But before we go back into the conversation, there's something so important today to talk about. Just in studio, one of our crew members, actually my producer today, one Ronald Asim, is celebrating their birthday, and we want to join him in celebrating this very day by saying happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ronald.
Happy birthday to you. Yes, yes, yes. Happy birthday to you, Ronald. We appreciate.
Are we allowed to ask how old he is?
I hope that will be for he will tell us, but surely we celebrate you, and we appreciate the kind of work you do to make sure this show and all the other shows keep running on Civic Space TV, and all the work you do. Thank you so much. Colleagues, from the birthday, we come back to the conversation, and here's where I want to start. In the past 1 week, one of the other things Donald Trump has done is his policy on immigration and immigrants, and he has been very clear on this. 2 days ago, we saw collision between him and the president of Guatemala. Donald Trump was sending Guatemalans from the United States of America. He sent 2 planes full of people, and the president of Guatemala sent them back. And Trump said, we're going to sanction you 25%. After 1 week, we put it at 50. After another week, we put it at 100, and so many other things. But we've also seen him sending people to Mexico, sending people to actually Colombia, sending people to many of these countries. And what we know, there are very many Ugandans and Africans in the United States of America. And we suspect, we actually know, because that's the official policy, some of these people are going to be sent home. Augustine, what does it mean for Ugandans, for Africans in the United States of America to be in a situation where they know anytime now I'm being sent home, where I left probably because things were not working out, probably because I wanted to practice my professionalism in the United States of America. Now you face being deported to your country.
I think that I agree with Donald Trump that he should send away illegal migrants or immigrants.
Yeah.
And because you see, if you have to be in the US, you have to be there legally. If the same way, if you have to be in Uganda, you need to be in Uganda properly legally. So I agree with his approach of sending them back, but also to those that they are bringing back to us here. It is an opportunity for them to reunite with us. Because you see, if you're in a foreign country and you're there illegally, you cannot move. In fact, your freedom is also suppressed. What you think is a green pasture turns yellow, and after that it turns to another color. It starts to get old. So I think that it is important for these people to reunite with their families, but also that should be a lesson to African people, especially, to start to appreciate the small things that are in their nations. It should also be an opportunity for us to say, look, give birth to children that you actually can maintain and within your means. Because what causes all that influx into the US are things to do with that. His problem with Mexico is that I think they have had their own struggles for a very long time. And Donald Trump is famous for even actually building a wall somewhere that stops immigrants from coming into the US, those that he calls illegal. I think it gives us a lot of opportunity to learn from his radicalism in the US, but it also gives us an opportunity to appreciate what we have in our nations and countries and states. So yes, for me, I agree with Donald.
Thank you, Bbosa. Look, people run away from a situation that is not good for them. And now they face being sent back to where they ran away from, and that now they even come when they have no links in that particular kind of situation. They no longer have what they had. Probably they sold off what they had to get means to get them to that particular location, and they're being sent home. Your thoughts on that?
The immigration policy, when you look back to the campaign of Donald Trump, you remember that statement he made that was eventually turned into a song. They're
Eating dogs.
Eating dogs, killing the cats.
Yeah,
and
I think he was referring to Haitian immigrants in Springfield, and he said they were eating pets, dogs, cats, and so on.
Exactly. So, resource-wise, first of all, he has mentioned illegal immigrants, right? Augustine has told us, at least if you're going to be in the US, be there in the proper procedure. Yeah, that is one thing to start. At least the government can account for you. But secondly, now you're there, but you're not accounted for, or the government did not let you in. As a country, the very purpose of issuing out visas is to probably assess whether we can take in these people, facilitate them or not. Yeah, that is a legal procedure. But when these people come unplanned for, they're definitely not going to be able to get resources. They're not going to get jobs, right? They're not going to get how to feed or fend for themselves. What are they going to turn to? They're going to turn into criminals. Yeah, they're going to turn into gangsters. USA is one of the places where we have many blacks. We have had people killing each other in the USA. Guns can be bought from everywhere.
Not blacks.
Eh?
Not blacks. All the other people.
Yeah, but this is part of everything. You can actually get the gun or knock down a white and take their gun and all that kind of stuff. So if we have, as a policy, even if it is in Uganda, we would have to reconcile such kind of process. I wouldn't agree with the idea of us having illegal Kenyans in Uganda, because when a crime is committed, how am I going to look for person field?
But what happened to Ubuntu and humanity? When people run to your country, to your home for rescue, you should be able to help them.
Let's say, for example, in Congo, what's happening in Congo, right? There is a UN mission called MONUSCO. Much as the US has not taken a stand in, maybe recently, has not taken a stand in helping or engaging militarily into the fight between M23 rebels and the government of Congo, you realize that there is a UN mission to support foreign aid and whatever.
The longest serving UN mission in the world, and indeed the largest. Again, it is the longest and the largest and the most inefficient.
And the most inefficient. Why? Because I will not go to the why, because that's not where I want to go, because that's a discussion altogether. But you realize that that is a process enough. If UN, for example, or USA hasn't withdrawn from UN, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't. If USA, through that process, is able to take in those people through the right procedures, those are right people to be there. Even the immigrants that we have, for example, in this country, that are able to go there through brain drain, the people who go for Cheyo, these people are there in right procedures, right? But what is happening at the southern border is actually people jumping over fences to enter USA, people sneaking into USA. Now, when we sneak into USA, what else do we do, right? Nothing. You're not going to get a job if you're not registered. The law is simple, get a job. But if you're not accounted for in the country, you're going to become a criminal. So as USA, even when you want to do Ubuntu, you have to do Ubuntu. You have to first preserve or protect yourself as a country, which goes back to what I told you first. A promise to Americans. Americans for Americans. If we are going to let in other people, we must make sure that Americans are safe first, and then we can let in other people. Now that is the back door that was let open, that needs to be closed, and then we go back to entry into the front door.
Wow. Augustine, what happens to these people now? Denied at home, denied where they ran to, they're hanging.
Yeah, I think that quite obviously the sanctions will come. And you see, at the end of the day, it is not just going to be on the two planes of people. It is now going to also be, there is going to be a spillover effect, not just on those people, but even on the country itself. And you see, this speaks volumes to a young country and to a small nation like that. I think that, and many more countries will take back those people because they also don't know them. Yes, you
left illegally.
You left illegally.
You entered illegally. You were
yes,
sent
so
back
the country
illegally.
also doesn't. The country also doesn't know you. So those people may seek refuge somewhere else in some country, maybe Uganda. Yes, we have had incidences.
Very open door policy.
Yeah, we have had incidences where refugees come to Uganda.
We had the Afghans.
Yes,
we had
yes.
people from Cuba way back.
Yeah, so they will somehow find themselves in some other country, again, legally or otherwise. But I think at the end of the day, it is a great inconvenience to the people and to their people as well.
Wow. Thank you so much, colleagues. Now I want us to talk about wars. And one of the things Donald Trump has kept promising is that he wants to end all the wars where the United States of America is involved. And key to that is before he even was sworn in, he participated in securing a ceasefire deal in Gaza, Israel, Palestine, Hamas, to be specific. We saw even before that there was not ideally ceasefire, but we saw prisoner exchange between the United States government and the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Yeah. He's now talking about ending the war in Russia, Ukraine. And they have also talked about ending the war in Sudan here. The United States government sent a delegation here. Just a few weeks ago, they met the president of Uganda. They want him to be the chief mediator in that process. And many of these things, should we look at Donald Trump as someone seeking global peace, or it is simply another way of trying to get involved in these countries? Yes, Bbosa.
I think what you're trying to talk about is whether or not Donald Trump wants to continue making USA the policeman of the whole globe. I think that when you get involved in these wars, even the nature of how this guy, the foreign countries or the superpowers have been involved in these wars is by choosing a side. They make the assessment and they feel like, I think Israel is right. They defend it, and in doing so, they are attacking the opponent, which will always escalate the war. Come here, just our neighbor in DRC Congo. Whichever side, if they choose a side, it will just always continue escalating the war. You've already said that this is the longest serving mission in the country. And that mission itself has a department that engages in military and fighting back, yes. Right? So at the end of the day, if you continue, if you choose to defend Felix Tshisekedi or the government of Congo, you're going to continue fighting with M23 rebels. Where does the conflict start from? I think the conflict starts from way back. Yeah, the causes of the conflict are potentially or primarily tribal, even because you're seeing the Tutsis in the M23s, and you realize that if you engage this war in a kind of manner of choosing a side, you're not going to achieve a mission, your objective. I think Donald Trump, in withdrawing or trying to say that I'm not on the side of Ukraine, I'm not on the side of Russia, I think this is a good deal. Yeah, let us have a way in which we can harmonize. There is always a way. You cannot tell me that the only way for you, because if you get involved in that quarrel, I promise you're going to choose a side.
Many times he has been accused of siding with Russia, and people keep saying Russia helped him win the 2016 election, and they say he has a debt to pay, and that's why they keep saying every time there is a proposal that the war should be ended majorly on Russian terms, they say he's actually paying back. Your thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to the fundamentals of mediation. If you want to mediate, I think you need to engage more the stronger party. Yeah? When you look at the strength of Ukraine, Ukraine is not strong of itself. Yeah? Ukraine is strong because of the foreign assistance that it receives. But then Russia can stand in and of itself. Now, for you to be able to end that war, you need to engage Russia more than, and that will include you having to make deals with them. Yeah? What is most important at the end of the day, Philip, is having lives of people not lost. Preserving humanity. There are very many people who are dying in the Middle East. In Palestine, you saw what was happening. Economies are collapsing. Yeah? But what is the cost? Can't we come to a conclusion? What is that deal that you're putting on table? What can bring Russia to satisfaction so that we cannot continue having that war? Otherwise, when you continue to defend Ukraine, you're going to continue that confrontation with who? With Russia, because Russia will feel like, no, you guys are what? Flying overseas to come and engage in our borderline conflict. But if you engage Russia more, make a deal with them, find a common position, what is the most important thing? Preservation of humanity. A life lost, we lose as a whole globe. Yeah.
Thank you. Augustine, the same Donald Trump that keeps preaching peace is threatening to take over Greenland from Denmark, is threatening to protect at all costs Taiwan from China. He's saying you protect the interests of Israel at all costs. He has threatened to take over the Canal of Panama just yesterday.
Yes.
He's talking about all these things don't look like someone that is looking for peace. How should we look at Donald Trump?
Well, I think that if you looked at Donald Trump's first term, for Africa, for example, there was a war in Sudan. And you must really know that most of these wars are actually initiated by the superpowers. And it somehow needs the superpower to end the war. In his first term, that is when Bashir was toppled. The US, Donald Trump, in this, actually sided with the civilians, properly packed Bashir out of Sudan, handed power back to the what? To the civilians. And I think that war somehow ended like that until Biden came in again. So I think that Trump's approach is a double-edged sword. He wants to create his own problems. He doesn't want to continue with the problems of the former president. And that's why he's saying, let's end let's end all these wars and create our own war. And I think that is a little dangerous. But of course, you know, if there is a war that involves China, there's a war that involves Russia, all the time, US will try to fight China because they have the same economic strength almost. So, but for Russia and Ukraine, you see, I told you already, US needs Russia, whether they want it or not. So they will somehow have to come and look like they have persuaded Russia to end the war. But also, the wars that Trump is threatening are actually in principle. And you disagree with Trump, and it threatens war or sanctions against your nation. And I think we should give him an opportunity to make his own mistakes, but we should also trust him that he wants peace. Because you see, the war that Trump began of saying America will only have two genders, male and female, that's again a very powerful war in itself. But which of those actually protect the values of humanity? I think ending war, and as you negotiate with those that you think you want to attack, is a better alternative. And I don't see in the presidency of Donald Trump, this 47th one, I don't see a lot of nations suffering from war, especially that is initiated and created by Donald Trump. you know that every US president starts their own war. What actually has been consistent with those presidents is that everyone who comes starts his own war, creates his own problem.
Yeah, he has actually been boasting over time that he's the only president in the history that between 2016 and 2020 he did not start any war anywhere. So certainly, but
I think they have that curse on them that in your second term somehow you must find a way out, and the other president that comes will have to first cool that war and then again make his own mistake and like that. I think those are their scorecards. They can do better. We actually have to pray for a better world, a world where peace is just not the absence of war.
Thank you. Price, I want us to speak to the leadership style and democracy, dictatorship, autocracy, and so many things. Many times Donald Trump has been accused of one, having dictatorial tendency in himself, but also having a soft spot for dictators across the world. And they kept saying his relationship with Vladimir Putin, his relationship, remember in his first presidency, he visited North Korea, and first US president to do that, and they kept saying, this guy might turn out to become a problem to democracy. And they kept, when January 6th happened, you referred to it, when his supporters went to the Capitol Hill to try and stop the confirmation of the Biden win, people said, actually, this is who the guy is. And 2 days into his new presidency, there's a member of parliament, the name goes off my mind, but from in the United States, who comes and says, we should actually remove term limits to allow Donald Trump stand for as long as he wishes.
Yeah.
Are we looking at a dictator in the making?
I think, who do we know? From where do we start knowing Donald Trump? He's a businessman, right? He's a capitalist.
True.
A serious capitalist who has thrived on capitalism. What is capitalism? Capitalism is an ideology that thinks of a person himself. I don't care about the rest of the world.
Survival and prosperity of the dominant class, if you're powerful enough.
Thank you. And that has explained his way of doing things. He respects how other people are doing their businesses and tries and makes sure that how they do their businesses potentially builds up on how he's doing things, right? When I read that thing last night about him trying to seek for a third term, 2 terms I think I've lived from 1776. Yeah?
Not 1776, because ideally, you know, we had, I think it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt who had 4 terms.
Yes. It has moved from way back. I think this is, you can, in law we call it the basic structure doctrine. Yeah. This a provision of the Constitution that if you attack it, you've broken the sanctity of the Constitution.
But you see, when you talk of the basic structure doctrine, again, the same law tells us that it should be able to speak to the aspirations of the people. And if the people of the United States of America find it befitting to grant Donald Trump another term in office, and they think he's the guy that can lead their country to where they want it to be, why not?
Now, it goes back to the question of Uganda and whether or not, when the Constitution was changed from extending the years of presidency from 75 to as and when, even if he's 105, he can stand. Question is on whether those were the aspirations of the people. It goes back to the question of whether it was actually democracy.
And that speaks to democracy again.
Yes. So, what are we talking about is that people are saying he's dictatorial. It hasn't been put to question. The aspect that we have seen of Donald Trump is that he's a capitalist. He's a businessman who puts his business, who puts America first and makes sure that all the allies he makes, the superpowers he makes, contribute to his remaining on top. Right? Now that, for me, is the businessman that I'm looking at. Now the issue of democracy then becomes when that motion is passed in parliament and all the processes that will go through to have the constitution amended. It goes back to how is the process? Is it fair? Yeah? When you look at Uganda, the processes that happened and the killings that happened during that process, that's a different story. What we shall see in USA, a country that we look at as the epitome of democracy, will show us whether he's a dictator or not. Democracy is a question of fact. Democracy is actually not a question of law. Yeah, it's what you said, that the law might say this, it could be the basic structure doctrine, but then the aspirations of the people would say otherwise. However, the processes during that time, if the Americans agree that should extend to 3 terms, it will be so. However, right now, the Donald Trump that we are seeing is not actually a dictator. He's actually fulfilling his promises that he made. By him making those declarations that he made, when I say female and male, you realize that his whole campaign trail, many people believed in him because of such statements that he made during his what? His campaign. What would be the effect for him to reach into presidency on his inauguration and then he ignores that? Is that being a dictator? No. Right? He's fulfilling his promises. That's why they voted him. Now, the issue of the LGBT people, how they would be treated and whatever, he did not say he's going to kill them. Now, that is what Napoleon would do. That is what Hitler would do. Put them on the line, you're an LGBT person, we shoot you down. That's a dictator. But this is a person simply fulfilling his promises. He's a businessman, putting America first. And
I have a second.
Yes.
Augustine, your thoughts on the leadership style of Donald Trump and as to whether he's a threat to democracy across the world?
I think that, depending on where you're seeing this from, for me, I have never, like you said, I've never thought that Donald is a dictator. But in any case, if you asked me of the best leadership style to employ in this current world, I would choose dictatorship. Because you see, everybody has an opinion. And everyone thinks their opinion must matter.
Squarely, many people agree that actually that kind of leadership is the best.
Yes.
Until it gets to the level of succession.
Yeah, when it gets to that level, then you now start to struggle here and there. But I think that Donald is not dictatorial. Donald is trying to, you see, unlike in Uganda and other developing countries, in the US, you voted against your contract with the people. And if in your contract with the people, what we call the manifesto, you said A, B, C, D, people are going to judge your performance based on the social contract that you made with them, far more than what they think or what they now think. In 2002, Donald Trump, then a businessman, like he has said, when he was interviewed about the possibility of war in Iraq, he actually said, yes, I think there should be that war should happen. In 2003, when the war was on, he actually changed his mind and said, the resources that we are using in Iraq would actually, if it was spent in the New York, it would be able to impact. So I think that he's someone that is simply trying to implement his thoughts. He was voted for his radicalism, and you know that makes you look like a dictator. However, his idea of allying with especially dictators in the world, and you can be sure that President Donald is going to ally with President Museveni so well. They are going to work very well. Vladimir and all these other people.
Hope for that.
Very well, because you see, all these are people who speak and then they're all radical in a way or another. So I think that, and you see, for you to be radical, you must get allies who are like you. They say, like you said, birds of the same feather will always flock together. So I think that even if Trump was a dictator, I think his dictatorial tendencies are in the right direction and will save the world a better deal.
Just like Kagame.
Thank you so much. Now, colleagues, I wanted to quickly talk about there is a trend across the world where the far-right parties and individuals are rising to power. When you look at starting with Donald Trump, a conservative, pure one. When you go to Europe, when you go to France, Marine Le Pen, she narrowly won the presidency. When you go to Germany, we know Chancellor Olaf was put out by conservatives. When you go to many of these other countries across, far-right parties, individuals are taking power, and what that means is they look inward. What we've been talking about, Donald Trump, America first. The Germans want to say German first. The French want to say France first, and so on. What is causing this kind of arrangement, and anyway, what does it mean for people who are in those countries, the immigrants, the aid? We know the conservative in America is now saying we can't keep giving you our money. Let's use it for Americans. The conservative in Germany says the same. The conservative in France says the same. What is going to happen of the rest of the world? Just quickly.
For me, I think that would be advantageous to Africa. Yeah? Because if we have countries such as USA, France is dominated oiling where there's most of those Central African countries, right? But if we have those countries trying to think about themselves, then I think it restores the relevance of, for example, let's say the African Development Bank, yeah, our regional markets, right? We have so many institutions in Africa that can actually drive the economies, the boundary independences of these particular countries. We have SADC, we have the East African Community. You have seen how it has been expanding. Now, when we have these countries stopping to think about the dependence on USA and now starting to think about the East African Community, be bound by it, by people of the same race, tribe, and whatever, ethnicity. I think that, you know, that in and of itself would be, this is what Kwame Nkrumah was talking about, right? Let us have Africa think of itself. Let us have independence. Yeah, while they think about going back, by the time they want to come back, we shall have
moved a step to the prosperity we desire.
Yes, because there is the African continent for trade area.
African continental free trade area.
Yes, let us have all these systems trying to drive the economic system. Let us not always continue fighting hard.
All right, Augustine, your thoughts?
I think that the rise for conservatism is happening everywhere, Africa and beyond. You saw in Uganda here in 2021, a conservative was number 2. Almost won the election in Uganda. Sure. So people are trying to start to own themselves and their countries to try to make impact first amongst within themselves. Like they say, charity begins at home. They're trying to create a country that works for them before a country that works for everyone. But also you realize that there is a growing trend of unemployment everywhere, and people now want to try to remain with their workforce within them. But what opportunity does this provide for countries like Uganda or African countries in general? It provides space, like you said, for regional integration, for trade relations with other countries, the change of priority, change of allies to other countries that think actually like them. Because you see, even in Uganda here, I bet 2026 we are going to have a president say we are building Uganda for Ugandans. In fact, if you have gotten a chance to go to Ministry of Internal Affairs where passports are given from, you know that if you're a foreigner of a specific tribe, for example, even within Uganda here, it becomes next to impossible for you to get not even a national ID, a passport, even when you have a national ID. So until, of course, recently when an executive order was also signed to treat these people like Ugandans. So yes, that is rising, and it is rising so fast. I can be sure that our next government, you remember President Museveni, I think he was speaking at a conference somewhere and said, you know, you shouldn't lie to us. We are building Africa for Africans. And this is a dream of Colonel Gaddafi. You remember we lost Gaddafi in the same procedure. The only challenge is that Africans saw it faster than the Europeans. And now the Europeans are falling on something that they inherited from Africa and are doing it not even in the right way.
Well, thank you, colleagues. Unfortunately, our time is very much fast spent. We could have a lot to talk about Donald Trump, his policies, but also events that are happening across the world. But we have just about 2 minutes to be out of here. I'll just call you on in about 30 seconds to give your final remarks. What do you think is going to happen? 4 years, just quickly.
Thank you, and thank you, viewers. I think that for the next 4 years, we all have to wear our seatbelts right. It is going to be very hard economically, especially if the US decides to cut ties completely and extend the term of cutting or freezing of these donations to beyond 3 months. Let us use the resources that we have very selfishly. Or this country especially has the potential to actually fund its own budget. And so we speak to those that are in those offices and are corrupt. That money or that you swindle in corruption could assist us replace the aid that people are taking away from this country.
Thank you so much.
For me, I think what is happening, it's not going to be easy for Donald Trump. Yeah, it's like starting up a project and writing letters. That is one thing. Then you start executing the project and you realize you fail to get the money to, or you face a lot of forces. So it's not going to be easy for him. I actually have a feeling that he will withdraw some of those declarations that he made. Otherwise, I would love to thank everyone, especially Shamim Nambasa, for giving me the opportunity to represent her here today. Yeah, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Bbosa Price, on behalf of Shamim Nambasa, thank you so much for your views and for making time for the conversation. Olowo Augustine, thank you so much for your views and for making time for the conversation. And to you, our viewers, thank you so much for keeping it the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. Special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance and all our partners for making sure all this keeps happening, putting a brake on the progressiveness of our nation and the continent and the world. Special thanks to the team behind the machines. We appreciate the work you do for us, and we continue to advocate for peace in all regions of the world that are having turmoil. Sudan, DRC, Mozambique, there is still uprising there, Ukraine, Gaza. We hope those ceasefires keep on and we secure peace there. Lebanon, talk about Mali, the insurgents there, Burkina Faso, Niger, and many other parts of the world that have turmoil. We say whoever can contribute to peace building in those countries, do so. It's the only way humanity will live sustainably. We say good evening, and may you have freedom always.